so grateful. We have another packed house, amazing. This film was 7 years in the making. The dream was to premiere here at Sundance. So thank you to Basil and the programmers for that opportunity. And I hope it resonates with you. At the end of the film, we'll come back to do a Q&A. There's some crew still here in Park City who's going to join us. And we're excited to hear what you think. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. That was awesome. So much laughter. And the applause when they're on the top. Thank you guys. That means so much. It's really touching to see it with a big crowd like this. This project, there's nothing rational about it. It was a harebrained passion play, labor of love. So everybody who got involved, from the financiers down to day players, did it based on a gut instinct, a leap of faith. So I'm so grateful that every last one of them believed in the film and believed in me. So on that note, we'll bring up some of them that are here now. Why don't we start with Maria Bukhonina, who is the co-director and producer. Maria moved to Russia during the war when I couldn't be there, lived with the Skywalkers for over the course of actually multiple years, traveled with them, developed a really close relationship, and was central to this, the heart and soul of the project. We also have our two DPs here, Renato Boraya-Serrano and Pablo Rojas. If they can come up, and we have associate producer and the composer of the theme song, Teresa dos Santos Costa, is also here.
Thank you all so much for being here and for bringing this fantastic film. I'm going to start with just a couple basic questions to get it going, and then I'll throw it up to the audience. But Jeff, at the premiere, you mentioned your unique background and history related to this. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your background with this idea and how you actually got
Sure.
it?
I was a very passionate but also very amateur rooftopper when I was in my teens and my 20s. For me, it was a way to make sense of the environment. I was reading a lot of theory about how everywhere we go, every destination is prescribed by the culture bubble, by society's machinery, and I wanted to find the hidden nooks and crannies, the tunnels underground and the rooftops above it, where I could figure out who I was and face my own fears on my own terms, which I think is a similar motivation for Angela and Ivan. When I started to find out that others were doing this bizarre activity all over the world, and they were taking it to crazy extremes and photographing it, I took off my proverbial balaclava and put on my sort of journalist cap, my filmmaker cap, and I started tracking the rise of this phenomena, looking for a story that resonated as deeply as the experience I had. And about almost 20 years later, I was rooftopping in the late 90s, and around 2015, I came across Angela. So she was just coming on the scene, but was the first female rooftopper of that caliber. She was so much more creative and acrobatic than the other stuff I was seeing. I reached out to her. She says she was raised in the circus. I'm like, okay, that'll help the story. and she introduces me to Vanya, who's the best rooftopper in all of Russia. And I'm trying to figure out whether they're rivals or maybe there's a burgeoning love affair here. And thinking, well, wouldn't it be incredible if we could tell a love story on top of the world? And if so, maybe we can use this extreme climbing as a metaphor for romantic trust. And it turned out our hunch was right, and we got some financing from XYZ Films and Library Films off of a sizzle. Maria joined, and these boys joined, and we dove in and had over 80 days of verite shooting over the course of multiple years. Film took all sorts of twists and turns, as you saw, and we leaned into those genre elements, the sort of thriller and the heist stuff, but I think always came back to this sort of North Star that we didn't want this film just to be about the fear of falling from heights. We wanted it to be about the fear of falling in love.
Oh. If I might ask you, the score is amazing. It builds and works with the genre elements and the love story as well. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the process by which you composed the music? Was it directly related to watching cuts of films? Did you do it independently in parts? How did that work for you?
Jack Broadbent, he's the other composer who did the majority of it, so applause for him as well. Unfortunately, can't be here today. To answer your question, yeah, of course, it's such an emotional range, right, in this film, from love and vulnerability, and then you have tension and fights and challenges, and then finally the resolution and the celebration. So I think it was quite a journey to go through it bit by bit, and then of course to combine it. This is why there's so many like different musical elements in there. We have classical music in there, we have very electronic driven music in there. And so, yeah, like Amjad and I for sure were driving us. We tried to bring Angela alive with the instrumentation of the circus. So you hear accordions, clarinets, cymbals, and so on. Maybe Jeff would like to add anything.
It was a bit of a challenge because we were crushing so many genres together, and part of why it took two composers is because there were these sweet, intimate moments like the theme where it felt like Teresa's melancholic touch and classical training was really the right emotional move. And then there are pieces where, especially for Varnya, his themes are really bumping, and Jacques is great at that. So it did worry us early on that we were being too schizophrenic, and but I'm loving it now. I think it's working. So they did a great job.
What was the most risky shoot that you had? It looked like most of it was shot by the folks in front of the camera. But for your crew, what was the most challenging shoot to get?
You're right. The extreme cinematography is done by Angela and Ivan. So every time they're hanging off of spires and walking the cranes, it's their POV, their GoPros on their heads. Inside Merdeka, they filmed themselves. They flew that drone that flies around. Ivan did it himself while holding her. The body cam. They're great cinematographers over there, like because they know how to work the cameras and the angles. And there's a lot of angles you see that it's almost too good. It's for coverage. It's because Angela has a very good understanding of angles. So she was the one who taped the GoPros on top of Merdeka to make sure you guys got that coverage. We weren't anywhere near it, of course. We have spent years with them, so they did learn from us on how to cover for long form because they're so used to just a short form Instagram or TikTok video where it's perfect shot one. You get one and you're done. So over the years of us working with them, we had to lean into what the long form means, meaning also not showing just the perfection of their relationship, but also showing us the dirt and the fights and the tears and all that. But in terms of safety, we originally thought we'll just cover the verite on the ground, we'll just do interviews and we'll shoot everything else. But of course, it started bleeding into each other. We did do some rooftoping with them. Of course, we stay at the, before they start getting on spires, we stay on the top level that's still safe, and we have developed a very rigorous safety protocol with them. We wanted to make sure we're not in their way, we don't distract them with their cameras. We make sure they have a very preternatural sense of balance on rooftops. So when you see them do that, it's kind of amazing because they just walk on the ledge without being afraid of anything. I think some of our cinematographers actually have a fear of heights. It was really hard on them to follow them, but we've agreed that we're not getting in their way. We've agreed we have a safety protocol we signed with the families. We want to make sure we stay away from them for our own safety and therefore their own safety. So it's been, when you film so long for several years together, you start finding a groove and you know when you find the rules. So it's a really combination of all of us contributing in our own ways.
Yeah, I think we included 3 moments where they broke the fourth wall, and some of them are a little, like the eye line isn't clear that they're talking to Maria or one of the crew. But yeah, they, especially early on, they didn't want the cameras there for those moments of vulnerability and weakness. And as they trusted us, and eventually once we showed them the rough cut in an early stage, I think they got it. It was hard for us to communicate what we were trying to do since they're creators and storytellers of such a different format. And we tried to get them to watch Man on Wire for a year and a half, and it was too long for them. And they wouldn't sit through it. But then when they watched our rough cut, they were glued to the screen. And after that, they got it. They understood we were telling their story a different way, and they wanted to be a part of that. They wanted to reach as wide an audience as possible, and they trusted us when we said, the more vulnerable and open and real you are, the more people will be able to identify with you in their own lives, because it's not going to be easy. What you guys do, no one does. And if we want people to feel like this is their relationship, to reflect on their own romances, then you need to show us the real stuff too. And we're so grateful they did.
Great, thank you for that.
Russia was cracking down on any journalism in the country.
There was a lot of concern for them, for their safety, because it was, anything she would say online could be turned against her. And also for him as well, like the country was drafting all males of all ages. In spite of saying they would only be drafting people of certain age groups and certain rank, they were kind of getting people on the streets. So we were really worried about getting them out on time, making sure that nobody gets left behind and stuff like that. So we were lucky that they got out almost immediately when we started.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll say one thing about that, which is we also did have conversations about how much we wanted to let that play into the story. Ultimately, we felt that the way it directly affected them was the way that we would incorporate it, which is, of course, that their accounts get blocked and they need to find a new form of income and they leave the country. But there were earlier conversations where this was a very unexpected turn, which is what you want in verite. And we considered that could be a bigger part of the story. As we started to cutting down the duration of the edit and really finding our core story, it felt like, let's just limit it to that one piece that's most relevant and directs their story. Yeah, the question is about how did we navigate the ethical and emotional and personal stakes of being involved in something that's dangerous. I mean, the thing that made me feel really a lot better about it was talking to their families and developing the safety protocol that Maria mentioned. They had the most to lose, the families. Obviously, Angela and Ivan were gung-ho, and having their sign-off and their investment in this project and understanding, looking them eye to eye, really, for me, solidified that we were going to be doing right by everybody involved. And it felt like as long as we were checks and balances for Ivan and Angela, where if they were pushing the envelope to a place that made us uncomfortable and we could dial them back, maybe we were even being more conservative than they would be in their lives. Of course, Maria will add that sometimes I had ideas that were more radical and they had to checks and balance me. But I think that the way we built the relationship was important. We had an intimate friendship built on trust. We also had a professional distance to make sure that we could have these difficult conversations when we disagreed. And we stayed out of their way when they were doing the things that they do, which is obviously way beyond our threshold for safety.
So the questions around the narration, crafting it, and then the twist, the shift towards talking to one another at the end.
Yeah, so we initially, as Maria mentioned, shot 11 hours of interviews with them in Russian. And our first cut of the film was entirely in Russian. We did decide early on that we weren't going to cut to the interviews, mostly because we had such a surplus of amazing imagery, and if we needed a certain mood, we had B-roll, or we had verite, or we had archival to use for that. So early on, we decided that the interview dialogue would become more like a narration. At some point, we had a conversation about reaching a wider audience, which Angela and Ivan were really excited about and wanted us to encourage. So we took the lines that were in the edit at that point, translated them into English, and then trained them to pronounce them with less accent and use voice enhancement to try to get less accent. So it was a long process. The direct address is right out of the interviews. So we did single interviews with both, and we did dual interviews with them in the chair together, which creates a whole different dynamic for those of you who do interviews. And at one point, this was a dialogue between them in the interview chair. And I think I just fell in love with it and got attached, and I thought there was something poetic about, that being the moment where they lean into each other, they come together for good. And so therefore, why not change the voice and have that be reflective of their emotional turn? And we debated the heck out of it, didn't we, Maria? So I'm glad you caught it.
Well, I wish we could keep going, but I do have to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.